Now that we know how the pencil tool works, and we also know how the brush tool works, it's time to introduce another tool called the blob brush tool. Now this tool is also here in the toolbar together with the paintbrush. The shortcut for it is not B, it's Shift B. And the main difference is that this tool actually has a brush size. Now when you double click on the tool, it has additional options, but we can already see that there is a size for the brush. I'm going to increase this, and by the way, you can see because I'm using a tablet, it's already set up to control the size with the pressure that I'm using on the tablet itself. So the harder I press the pen, the bigger the brush gets. Of course, I can always switch back to fixed size, which means it's going to be the same size always, but I'm going to keep it on pressure. I will come back to this and explain it in more detail, but for now, let's just see how this works. So as you can see, it has a brush size, and when I paint, the main difference here is not just that I have a very big brush, but also that the resulting object is actually a filled shape. So it's not a path that follows the direction in which I drew, but it actually creates a blob, which is a filled object. So while the brush tool and also the pencil will draw with a stroke, the blob brush draws a fill. Let me just change the color of these objects so we can see the difference better. I'm going to turn this also yellow. And now if I select one of these paths, you can see the anchor points on it, or we can see it also on this path. So the lines are following the anchor points, while on this shape, the anchor points are all around the shape and not in the middle. So that is already a big difference. But let me show you one additional thing as well that you need to remember with the blob brush. That is that you can change the size of it by using the square brackets on the keyboard. You can even press and hold them down to increase and decrease the size. And when you draw a line and you continue drawing and overlapping the previous shape, these two will become one joined shape automatically, as long as the color is the same. If you draw somewhere else and not connect the two shapes, then obviously it will be two separate objects. So that's one, there's another one. And if I deselect this shape as well and just use a different color and paint over these, because it is a different color, of course it's not going to be automatically connected into the other shapes. Now you are probably wondering, why is it important to have a tool like this? Well, for me, in my workflow, this serves mainly for coloring. So this is a great tool to color very quickly details, and I'm going to show it to you here on this hat. First of all, I'm going to lock it. There's a shortcut. If you press Command 2 or Control 2 on PC, that's a quick way to lock the selected object. Then I'm going to select the blob brush and pick a color. I'm going to use maybe orange color for this, or red, and that's going to be the main fill color for this shape. But before I draw, I will also do something else. As you can see, currently it's actually painting on top of the hat, but what I want to do is to paint behind it. Now what you can do in Illustrator is to change drawing modes, and you will find an option called Draw Behind here at the bottom of the toolbar. The shortcut for it is Shift D. With that, you can actually toggle between Draw Normal, which would mean draw in front, and then Shift D switches to Draw Behind, which means when you draw, it automatically will appear behind whatever you have on the current layer. As long as this mode is selected, you will be able to draw and create shapes at the bottom of the current layer. So that is a great technique for coloring. You can see already that when I go over this shape, everything is going to appear behind it. Of course, I could make my brush bigger, but I quite like painting over and just quickly achieve what I wanted. Now, you can, of course, then switch color, and I'm going to pick yellow, let's just say, for this ribbon part here. So I'm going to paint over that. Once again, just very quickly, those areas paint over it with yellow. Now what happened there is that because the draw behind was still on, the new shape was actually created all the way at the bottom behind the red item. Of course, I can always go to the layers panel and drag that group above the red object, but it's also good to remember that you can always switch between drawing modes. And if you use draw behind often, then it might be wise to start with smaller details first and then draw the bigger areas. That way you don't even have to go to the layers to move things around. Now you might be thinking that this looks really sloppy and there's a lot of parts that goes outside of the hat, but what you can do as always is to unlock the hat, select all these details together, and then use our trusty shape builder, holding down Alt or Option, and very quickly remove all the unnecessary details. Now for the yellow bits, I'm going to lock temporarily the red parts, and then I select again the hat, which has the outlines and that yellow bit, and then again use the shape builder tool, hold down Alt, and remove quickly those parts that we don't need. And to make it even faster, I will show you another great technique. For erasing, what we can also do is to select this yellow shape. I will just zoom a little bit closer just so you can see it better, and then select the eraser tool, which is Shift E, or it's here on the toolbar. And the good thing about this tool is that it works exactly like the blob brush. It even has size options, just like the blob brush, but instead of drawing, it erases. So we can change the brush size just like with the blob brush. And the best thing about it is that it only deletes from the selected shape. So because I have that yellow shape selected, I can quickly remove the parts that I don't need and keep the parts that I wanted to use in this design. So that was a quick way of coloring, but of course there's other ways of coloring as well. And once I show this to you, you might feel like, why didn't you just use this in the first place? Well, you have to get used to that in Adobe applications, and it applies to Illustrator as well. There are many different ways of doing the same thing. And that's exactly because every artist prefers to do things in their own way. And if you know different techniques to achieve the same result, you will always have the option to decide which one works best in that current artwork that you are working on. So let me show you this quickly. I'm going to select this, copy it, and I will also quickly delete the colors from it. So that's that. I will just move everything slightly to the left. So now that I have a duplicate here, I'm going to have this selected. And remember I showed you this in the previous video, the Live Paint Bucket tool. With this one, I can fill in colors. Once again, I just need to select the colors I wish to use. And all I need to do is to click on the area which I want to fill in with that color. Now it works really quickly and very nicely. We can use the left and right arrows to switch between colors from our swatches. And as you can see, very quickly I can get to an almost exact result that we have on the left side, apart from that few little details here. And that is where the blob brush was actually more effective, because to go through these with the paint bucket, I would have to click on each section one by one. And you might still think that this is faster, but when you have a lot of tiny details, this tool might not be the best way to colorize your drawings. And you have to be careful not to click on the stroke, because even the strokes can be colorized with this tool. So when it's tiny details like these, you have to really zoom close to be able to cover those parts as well with paint. Now if you look at it from a distance, it looks great, but the best way would have been to combine the two techniques. And that's another very important concept to understand. To combine tools is usually the best and most efficient way of working. How you combine tools and in what order you use them is up to you. As long as you combine them, you usually will be more effective working with Illustrator. So let me just go back a few steps until I get to that point where I started to be struggling with the Live Paint bucket. Up to this point, it was easy. We just clicked on the big areas. But that's when I would switch to the blob brush tool, zoom closer, click somewhere outside to make sure I deselect this, and then select the blob brush tool. It has the same color still highlighted. I can make my brush smaller, and to make sure that I can paint behind this, I'm going to lock that group in which I have the hat, and I'm going to start painting. You see, because we still have the paint behind option enabled, it just goes nicely behind it, and I can very quickly fill in these spaces much faster than struggling with the live paint feature. There you go. Now we can zoom out, and you see again a combination of two different tools allowed us to work much faster. So to summarize what we learned is that the blob brush tool is great for coloring, but we can also use it in combination with the live paint bucket tool. And don't forget that you can also change the drawing mode to draw behind instead of draw normal and paint things in front of the existing shapes. Another tool that we used here in this video was the eraser tool, which is very similar to the blob brush tool, with which we can erase along a line that we draw. So just wanted to show you how effective it can be on drawings. And to finish this video with a shortcut, if you hold down the Alt key while using the eraser tool, you can actually erase along a selection. So you can crop an illustration, for example, very quickly and keep only a portion of it. In the next video, we will look at a couple of additional tools, which I usually call assistance tools or assistance drawing tools, because they are not the main tools for drawing, but they can be very useful to refine and combine your existing lines.